right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is December 23rd, 2020. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve. The market is mixed today, right up against the all-time high. I believe the Russell 2000 is hitting an all-time high today. And yeah, it's been a wild year, and looking through a bunch of charts, there's been tons of stocks that have just kind of gone parabolic. It's been extraordinary. So anyway, S&P is it's got a reasonable gain for the year. So it looks like everyone's going to kind of coast into the new year. So yeah, let's just take a look at where we are. Here's something interesting is this trend line. This trend line that goes back to, geez, when does this thing start? Like November 10th, right? So yeah, the market had kind of this interesting double dip sort of pattern here. Broke out of this little triangle that I drew and just popped up, and now it's just been sort of riding up this trend line. And you can see that a couple days ago there was a little bit of a sell-off. It's been a couple of kind of wild small sell-offs, and basically just still held this trend line though. And so that's sort of the first line of defense. All right, been an interesting year. Year to date, there's a year to date chart. So we started here at, well, let's see. The close on New Year's Eve last year was 3230, and here we are at 3700. So we're talking, 400 S&P points. What am I saying? 470, almost 500 S&P points. So, and of course, we still have a few days of trading before the end of the year. So it's kind of interesting. There's the market itself, like the S&P itself, has kind of underperformed a lot of other stuff. A lot of other stuff. So, but anyway, I won't get into all that. So what's important here is I just wanted to, let's see what the Qs look like here. QQQ. Yeah, same sort of thing here. The Qs busted out of that triangle. You could probably draw some sort of a trend line here. Trend lines at this steep of an angle here aren't necessarily that useful, but it still shows sort of the angle of the ascent here. And I was reading something last night about the Fed buying $120 billion worth of bonds until things improve. And so sometimes I just wonder how the market can just continue to go higher and higher and higher, and where all the new money is coming from, right, to drive this thing up. So, and the other thing that's going on right now is we got all this craziness in, like, solar stocks and electric vehicles. There's all these electric vehicle makers, and it's kind of funny. I mean, those of you that have been around for a while know that I've always said the stock market's is mostly a popularity contest. And so, I mean, seriously, when is most of the cars on the road going to be electric? My guess is that's still way out. And yet, every day there's like someone talks about some electric vehicle company I never even heard of, and it's interesting. So now Tesla is in the S&P 500, and Tesla added to the S&P 500. Look at this run up. It went parabolic, added it to the S&P 500, and it's actually down some since it was added. I think I read that well, I forget what it is. It's something like, it's got a couple of percent weighting. All right. So for some reason, if Tesla cracks, right, and trades down, and the news yesterday was that Apple's going to start working on electric cars, and so I saw something this morning that one of the Wall Street firms put out a report that said that that could be a problem for Tesla. Lots of craziness going on, but hey, I mean, at least they have electric cars, out there. But so, eventually we're all going to be driving electric cars. So that's going to be kind of interesting. So I wanted to take a look through the open trade. Oh, this is the closed trades here. Pretty nice batch. This last sort of batch of closed trades here. The ones from November here. There was a few of them kind of got stopped out for like small losses, but we had some really nice gains in this last sort of batch here. And the funny thing is that the market never really took much of a dip, right? I mean, the market, individual stocks obviously have taken some dips, but the market itself, see, that's what's kind of cool about our system is that it's it's more objective than I am. Like it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to say, oh, this market's overvalued and hasn't pulled back and this and that. It's basically just looking for trade setups, and it's going to continue to find decent setups, and so no matter what we think about the market, it's just doing its thing completely objectively. So which brings me to take a look at the open trades here. Let's start at the top with this new one that's open here, this Neo. Nice pattern. Speaking of electric cars, I'm pretty sure, I may be off, but well, let me look. I'm pretty sure that this Neo is an electric car company here. Let me just verify that because there's another ticker symbol. It's like NEO. Yeah, this Neo designs, manufactures, and sells electric vehicles in the People's Republic of China, Hong Kong, and the United States, United Kingdom, Germany. Huh, interesting. So yeah, here you go. Electric car maker. I mean, look at this chart. This is, really nice stair step pattern, and there's a huge run up, and then of course, here we go. Got the little, what looks to be a pretty nice sort of a medium duration pullback. And look at that perfect like little sort of pivot low. Now, of course, you wouldn't have known that that was a pivot low day until a couple of days later, right? And that's sort of how it works. like you can kind of you can look at it. You could look at one of these bars and say, oh, that looks like a pivot low, or or the prior day could have been, the day before that could have been, if you got a couple days follow through to the upside. But I mean, sometimes the pivot low days, the change in trend pivot low days really stand out, and you can kind of spot them almost immediately, right? Or actually the following day. It's almost impossible to spot them, the very day that they happen. But anyway, regardless, that's kind of a nice little, narrow range pivot low day. But the real key here is that it broke the trend line, and my guess is that let me get a. I was looking for my chart with the MACD on it. Where'd that go? Oh, huh. Well, I would be wrong. I was gonna guess that the MACD started going positive here, but not quite. It's close, but not quite. Did get a few. We did start to get a few closes here over the 9 EMA. Interestingly enough, it seems to be pulling back a little. Well, actually, it's unchanged right now. So this is a little bit delayed here. So it's sold off a little at the open and is popping back up. But It's a pretty good looking pattern, quite honestly, right? Nice change in trend, and so everything's looking pretty good here. That the initial stop is a little bit below this particular day where it broke the trend line, and so it's sort of headed in the right direction. Um, as we speak, for whatever reason, these free stock charts here went to delayed data at some point this year, which is not a huge big deal because over on my other computer I got my Thinkorswim up, but for instructional purposes and especially the way that we're doing it, it's kind of a laid back swing trading sort of thing. And we designed the system so that it didn't really, you didn't have to sit around and watch these stocks like a hawk anyway, right? It's more of a hands-off type of thing. And so anyway, so far so good on Neo. As we speak, the price is 46.68. So it's back to, is that right? Yeah, 46.68. Huh, that's odd. So there was Tuesday, 47.58. Huh. Oh, I'm sorry, 47.80. I was looking at the wrong stock on my list over here. Yeah. Oh wow. It's actually going positive now. 47.82. So yeah, little dip at the open. Now it's turning back around. Yeah. I mean, it looks to me like a good setup. You got a good change in trend, and so the idea is that it's going to trade up here. What I didn't put on the chart yet was the target. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. The target on this Neo is, I mean, the high probability profit target where you'd want to take a little bit of profits off the table is up here at 52 even. So let me put that on the chart real quick. So, the idea is that you get into one of these trades and you've got a target set to maybe pull half off, and decent little percentage move, right? I mean, this is a mid price stock, and then if it continues to go up, then the trailing stop will keep us in for the rest of the ride if we get some sort of a move like that, right? So that's basically a good look at and this one just triggered a couple days ago. So next on the list is, moving down the list here, EGOV. EGOV. You can see it hit and it just went straight through the target, the compensation target, continuing to move higher, looking great. It's kind of got a similar trend line break sort of pattern and pivot low, and caught it on the way up, and trailing stops moved up. And so everything about this is looking good, right? This would have been a buy on 12.8 at the open, like right there. And nice move here. So percentage wise, this thing is and it's up a little bit right now. It's up, almost 0.5%. So there's about 10%. It's about a 10% move, fairly short amount of time. Another beautiful sort of uptrending stock. This was probably earnings here. So stock's going up, has a nice little pullback. That pullback sets it up for a resumption of the primary trend, and there you go. It's amazing when I look through the charts how many stocks are just kind of on this, just rising at like a 45-degree angle. So zoom back out on that chart there. I don't really remember what this was that I drew on there, but I think that was an example of how this stock can just kind of rip higher in a fairly short amount of time, is what I was talking about last week, and here you go. That's what it's doing. So it barely even paused here at the prior high. So sometimes when you look at, like, if you look at the Neo here, you think, okay, well, it can probably rally up to the target, but it's going to run into a bunch of resistance at this prior high here. But sometimes you go back and you look at the chart, after a while, and if it ends up looking like this, then like so many of them do, right? So many of them. Sometimes they get to the prior high and then they stall out. So typically, and these are kind of, this is kind of a shallow pullback. There's like shallow pullbacks and deep pullbacks and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes they struggle more to get back to the prior highs when you got a deeper pullback. So much as but anyway, so far so good on this, looking real good. Those two are looking pretty good. This next one here, this CYRX, this thing's just really it's just kind of struggling sideways here. So, excuse me. And the trailing stop was kind of actually, this was the initial stop, I believe. I don't remember, but the trailing stop had been going sideways for a long time, and then finally the price kind of, came up here and made a few days of higher lows, but it's down a couple of percent today. So it's just, I drew this line here originally, like originally when this thing opened, I drew this line and just never, hasn't not been able to like push through this gap down here. And so, yeah, looking a little bit rough here, but no huge big deal. For every now and then we're gonna latch on to one that's just not gonna do a whole lot, but the gainers will make up for it. So this one not too exciting. Um, so we'll move on. And the funny thing is this one's not too exciting either. This QDEL. Um, I mean, it seems to be like forming its little sort of cup thing here, like it wants to cup up, and so you get like a little rally and a little bit of a dip, and then more of a rally, and then a little more of a dip, and then so it's just sort of. Oh, and by the way, this trailing stop has not changed since back over here, right? It's just sort of hanging out right there, which is kind of nice because it's in a good spot basically. It's in a good spot, like right below this pattern low right here. So I mean, hey, every now and then, this is the one that last time it had a gap down like this and bottomed out, turned right back around and ripped higher. And this time it's sort of just struggling, going sideways. But it is sitting a little bit over the trigger price, so not a huge big deal here. But and quite honestly, I mean, it looks like just a couple of decent days send it up here at least to the target. So basically, it is what it is. Um, and then last but not least is this GDS, which kind of has, it has kind of a similar sort of sideways pattern, but it was able to pop up here and tag the target, right? So it's just kind of hanging out. There was one long range day that took it up basically above all this. So you can see the trailing stops come up a couple of times, but it's still it's not going up at a 45-degree angle, right? So anyway, I mean that's it. There's 5 open trades. We're headed into the holidays, so things are going to be a little bit thin, and so I mean tomorrow the market's open half a day, which it always seems kind of silly to me. So real quick, let's take a look through the pending trades. I think tomorrow's like a federal holiday now, Christmas Eve, and so if I'm not mistaken. All right, let's let's just jam through the charts of these real quick, and we will see if any of the charts look good. Start at the top here, CYRX. So this thing's like just now hit the. This has just hit the pending list like yesterday or whatever. So it's gonna because it's going into like its little pullback mode here, right? So in theory, like this is gonna do its thing and hopefully continue down to a certain point, and then the trigger price is going to continue to move down. The trigger price right now is sitting like right above all this resistance here. And so I went into detail last week about how that works. Like when a stock first hits the pending list, first hits the pending list, the trigger itself is going to be a lot higher than the current price. And the idea, of course, is that over time this trigger will move down, move down, move down, move down, and then theoretically, I mean, the way it's designed is that theoretically it's going to come down and meet the price when the price bottoms out and then turns back up, right? And so let me just put this back, another one back up here. And so anyway, don't get overly concerned about the idea that the initial trigger price is so far above the current price, because that's sort of the way it's designed, is that it hits the pending list, and then out in the future the trigger comes to meet the price when it hits when it gets closer to the bottom of the cycle and then turns back up. So conceptually, that's what it's all about. Let's look at Boeing here. So Boeing is on the pending list. Yeah, Boeing's been an interesting stock. Let's look at the year to date on Boeing. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, Boeing, I mean, look at that. Boeing has been from up here at $350. Whoops, accidentally skewed my screen here. Let me fix that real quick. That was kind of weird. There we go. So Boeing's been from $350 to under 100, and so now it's kind of bounced. But this is actually kind of a nice looking little pattern right there. It kind of looked like at first. It kind of looked like a trend line break, but not quite. So here's the big question is, and we don't know this yet, but was this like the pivot low of the pattern? Is the change in trend starting? I mean, that's a that's a 2-2 pivot low, I guess you could say, because you got 2 days after it and 2 days before it. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because it could sell down from here. Don't have the trend line break yet. Let's see. The trigger price is at 229 right now. I'm gonna mark that on here because it's gonna be interesting to come back and look at this, since this is such a widely followed big cap name. So right now, and we'll come back and look at this next week. Trigger 229. And so in theory, if it breaks this trend line, I think I screwed up my trend line. If it breaks this trend line and starts to rally back up here, the trigger is going to catch it on the way up. If the stock and of course we need to close above that trigger. See, that's sort of and that's why you see, if I change this to a line chart, Yeah, everything looks a little bit different on a line chart. And so, because it's using the closing price. So you need to close over the 229 in order for it to trigger in. And that's how we avoid getting sort of sucked into, like one day it could kind of spike up there and then just fade down. And like I mentioned last week, they say, that the smart money is buying at the close, not at the open. And so, or whatever. I mean, institutions are concerned with the closing price rather than the intraday noise, I suppose. And so that's just, and we've seen this a lot of times over the past year where a stock will like poke up through the trigger price intraday a few times, never close above it, and then the current sort of dip or whatever just continues. The stock continues down. So anyway, there's been a few small isolated cases where I might have recommended or suggested that and usually these are like super volatile, high powered stocks, look like they could just like, rip through the trigger and go up 10% in a day. So there's been a couple of those this year, but on Boeing anyway, this is a good setup. So all right, let me go through these a little faster here. Here's the mRNA vaccine company. Same sort of thing here. I mean, it had a huge run up. I mean, huge, right? From down here, 65 bucks to 180, and now it's taking a little dip. And today looks like, and I don't know, I don't know why the stock is down like this. Sure, there's people that follow it, really closely, and there's a reason. But mRNA and Pfizer are both, well, had pretty good, decent little, trade in Pfizer or whatever. It kind of had a weird pattern with the gaps, but Pfizer's also on the list, right? It's a pretty nice little dip in Pfizer. The vaccine stocks. Here's MOH. Um, this is where the trigger was last week when we were here, and the trigger has moved down, and so this is interesting. I wish I had actually marked the price on there. I didn't, but so the trigger's down here now to MOH trigger 206.50. So that's like, wow, 206.50 is that's down here, huh? So this thing could theoretically trigger today. They don't always trigger on trendline breaks either, so I'm gonna take that off of there because that's kind of skewing everything. And so, you know, typically the pattern sort of matches what's going on, but not always, So this one could trigger in here. And basically, it looks to me like it's kind of trying to break above like this consolidation here. So that's more likely why the trigger's like down this low rather than up across what would be a trend line break. So anyway, moving on real quick, Walmart. Walmart's in a pretty a pretty significant little sell-off here, which is sort of interesting. If it drops too much, it may just come right off the list. So that's sort of interesting. JD had a little pop today. It's kind of a nice pattern too. JD is trading above the trigger price right now. So this thing could theoretically, depending on what it does today, this could trigger in. And JD has been on the pending list since 12/9. So where's that? It's back over here. Interesting. Interesting little sort of pop today. Quite honestly, I usually like to see like a tighter pattern than this. But I mean, look at this stock. It's sort of all over the map here, right? It's extremely volatile. So I usually like a little bit of a tighter pattern, and I hate to get triggered in on a gap up like that, but I mean, sometimes, I mean, look over here, it gapped up and then just ripped higher right through the prior highs. So that's entirely possible here. Looks like we had a trade in this, way back here. That looks pretty good too. Way back here in May. Had a little channel break and took a nice leg higher there. So, and it could have filled on a gap too. So I won't criticize. And then last but not least is this ABC where, and look at this, right? The first trigger was at 104. And then, I came back and the trigger had moved down a little bit, trigger had moved down a little bit, and look at this pattern. And so this is probably the best example of how the trigger price can actually, this was like sort of my mock-up of the stock, breaking out of this little channel here and going to the upside, which hasn't happened yet. So I'm going to take it off. And so, here we are. This still hasn't triggered, and the trigger price is all the way down here to 99.50, right? So there you go. I'll mark that on here right now. And then, yeah, this is probably the best example of sort of how a pending trade comes on the list at first, and then that trigger sort of migrates to meet the price. And so this actually still, this is still completely viable. At some point, like if this thing dropped out of the bottom of this, it'd probably go off the list. There's a certain threshold where a stock's in a pullback, and if it goes below a certain threshold, then it's just, it's just gone. It's not going to stay on the pending list forever, but I'll zoom out on that a little bit. Yeah, this is what I was talking about before. This could kind of be, we're getting into deep pullback territory, and so it could easily bottom out and turn back around and make a decent move. So there you go. So anyways, that's it. We looked through the 5 open trades, and we looked through the pending trades, and that's basically it. So I'm going to wrap this up, and I hope y'all have a great Christmas, tomorrow being Christmas Eve. And so I will catch you back here next week, same time, same place.